IT vendors and new ways to create and expose assets that are on the system, and all that with using common standards and skills. So the idea is, how do we get all these things onto the Nonstop platform, or allow it really with capabilities for Nonstop? So this particular presentation is going to go over sort of market trends a little bit, not too much, creating new solutions on Nonstop, and then getting the most out of your existing applications. So what are these customer needs? You've probably seen, some of these things: mission critical APIs, continuous big data as a service, analytics, all these things. So what are we hearing from CIOs? Really, that there's a great need for speed right now, in an ability to come to market quickly and get to value quickly when you do introduce a new service. These things, the CIOs are still under the constraint of budgets, so these things have to be cost effective, low TCO, and low risk. Most staffs have decreased over the years, so getting productivity out of the staff and no steep learning curves on things is a high priority. Having a good customer experience, a good user experience, is absolutely critical now. And that's where we see a lot of the agile stuff going, to be able to do things quickly, bring things up quickly, test quickly, and get things out. Although we still have to be concerned with compliance, regulation, legal aspects of everything. If you've looked at Discover, our CEO, Antonio Neri, is saying this is now, we're entering the age of insight. So this big data, analytics, artificial intelligence, everything like that is really coming into play in a big way. And how do we leverage common technologies and standards? So on the one hand, we see we need innovation, we need agility, we need a good user experience and productivity. On the other side, we needed to be low cost, we needed to come to market quickly, we needed to be low risk and with minimal effort. So how do we achieve all these things? If we look at Gartner, if we look at McKinsey, there's a number of consulting organizations that talk about these two modes of IT: the sort of traditional, standard, regular applications that are being run. They're very robust, they're critical services, they're enterprise class, and they're scalable, robust, well-engineered services, and automated to a large extent. The new stuff is innovative, agile. You may have heard the term Scrum and Sprint: quick time to market, quick time to value, getting things out the door quickly, and being very opportunity focused is important. And Gartner sees this, or calls this, bimodal IT, that we really have two organizations running within IT, the sort of standard classic applications, and McKinsey calls it the two-speed architecture. And the challenge is to develop these new services anywhere, but after you develop these new innovative agile services, what's the effort to actually make it scale and make it highly available? So the one thing that's usually not discussed, I mentioned in one of my connection articles, is the idea that these innovative agile services that are quickly developed, if they are in fact successful, they sort of move into the robust, well-engineered services side. What you want to do is develop something that's going to have long-term effects. So things will float between the two. And the rhetorical question we ask here is, wouldn't it be nice if there was an architecture and platform that could handle both modes equally well? Oh, if only there were such a system. Yes, of course. So we talk about Nonstop here, that and the ability to really combine those two nodes, you know, and I say it somewhat jokingly, but we really do support both modes equally well. Leveraging your existing services as is, we see the core business services that are likely already running on the Nonstop platform. But can you develop new services, agile services? Can you do sprints on Nonstop? Deploying Nonstop allows you, we think we are available for this. And the good news is that by developing them on Nonstop, you sort of automatically get the scalability and fault tolerance that you want in a successful rollout of new applications. So you can focus on these business outcomes, and we facilitate the innovations without any sort of technical debt of having to bolt on availability or scalability after the fact. So the idea in developing new applications on Nonstop, and if we look at sort of cloud native stuff, which is involved really with microservices, that's the new way to develop things in a cloud native environment, along with this continuous development, continuous integration, developing these services in a whole DevOps model. Well, we've sort of encapsulated all that with the Nonstop X system and virtualized Nonstop systems. DevOps, we're supporting really the whole platform there under DevOps, so we can fit into a whole DevOps environment. We're supporting various API gateways here, REST and JSON, HTTP, web services, to be able to access microservices on the Nonstop platform. And you can leverage standard state-of-the-art technologies and tools to develop these microservices. Strong use of open source now, and the ability, like I said, to have this transparent fault tolerance and scale out. So we can develop these microservices very easily on Nonstop and use either our existing database or the somewhat newer in-memory cache, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We can also port services if you have systems that are, let's say, running on Linux and you'd like to bring them onto Nonstop for scalability and availability. We can now do this very easily with Nonstop path sockets. So what is path sockets? We're not going to go into deep depth on that. That's a presentation in and of itself. But most applications now are developed over a socket connection, running over IP. So these things can really be taken as is without any reprogramming. Just install this path sockets library, which immediately makes it transparent, brings it under TSMP or pathway as a server class. So now it becomes scalable as we can run multiple instances, and also highly available as the pathmons look over it. If anything fails, it's restarted. So you get this without having to do anything other than installing this library. So there's no code rewrite, nothing else. So if you want to port an application onto Nonstop and take advantage of the benefits, it's becoming increasingly easier. So I did mention the in-memory cache, and this cache is really a port of Redis, the NoSQL database, the open source Redis, onto Nonstop. We've put it onto Nonstop. We created a process pair out of it. So this is now makes Redis highly available, fault tolerant, continuously available, and it guarantees the data replication. Everybody loved the speed of Redis. It was one of the fastest NoSQL databases out there. What everybody complained about was the availability. It would drop from time to time. So now we have a nice NoSQL key value store running on Nonstop, extremely fast. If you're looking to do some of the geospatial stuff, Redis supports that. So we now have that available on Nonstop through this IMC capability. It's all put into measure. So it's now fully automated and fully running on Nonstop. It's just another database option. And if we look at microservices and developing microservices on Nonstop, they can take advantage of our database, but you don't really develop the microservice on Nonstop any differently than you develop it on any of the other platforms. We have a standard interface here, REST, HTTP, all the standard interfaces. Generally, you're developing microservices under a framework architecture that's available on Nonstop. So all you're really doing is developing the service itself. Maybe it's a balanced lookup. Maybe it's a patient lookup, something like that. Something very small, very stateless, ideally, but you can have stateful microservices. It fits into our architecture very well. There's really no limitations on how you want to develop microservices on Nonstop. Microservices can call other microservices. Microservices can use the SQL MX database. They can use the IMC database. Combination of that, microservices can call our legacy or classic systems that are running in TSMP or pathway services. So you really have a lot of flexibility in how you develop microservices on Nonstop. The other thing that we've done or invested in is database compatibility. As you know, we've for a long time suggested customers move from Oracle and move on to Nonstop based on our availability, our scalability, and our ability to keep things up really all the time with the database. But that's has been quite an effort. What we've done is really invest in supporting PL SQL, or the Oracle language, if you will, in the database. So a lot of the PL SQL is now supported on Nonstop. So it makes it much easier to migrate Oracle applications onto the Nonstop platform without having to do a lot of rewriting or changing at all, supporting the application, supporting the database functions on Nonstop. So it's a big effort. It will continue, but we're doing quite a bit right now. And you may ask yourself, well, why would I want to do that? Well, the idea is that getting to Nonstop AL4 type availability, which means, anything can fail on the system and the end user is really sort of unaware of that happening. To do this on Oracle, you have to do a lot of things. You have to add RAC, their real application cluster. This requires special certified DBAs to run and manage that. You have to load their maximum availability architecture, add hardware to set this whole thing up. So there's a lot of complexity to getting to the Nonstop level of availability. If you have a Postgres open source database, you have to add clustering. You have to assemble these things. You have to find people that know how to support a highly available Postgres database. And you have to add code to it. So there's a lot of complexity in getting to this level. Whereas you have a Nonstop system, it's really this AL4 and no single point of failure out of the box. All you have to do is just add nodes. You don't have to rewrite anything. You don't have to do anything. And you really don't have any scalability limits with Nonstop. So it becomes a very easy mission critical database to support. So if you are struggling with Oracle or Postgres or other open source databases to make them highly available, you may consider migrating them on to the Nonstop platform. And we really have put a lot of money and effort into making this database very modern and supporting all the things that you would need on it. So you can see this supports virtualized or standard platform database. We're now offering multi-tenancy on the database, so you can effectively firewall off different instances of the database from each other. If you've got different business units, or even if you're supporting different customer bases, you can have a multi-tenancy implementation on Nonstop. We're supporting all sorts of infrastructures, private cloud, bare metal, containerized. We've done some lab work on running containers on Nonstop. And if you caught last year's TBC, there's actually a whole presentation on containers and Nonstop containers. So we're deeply looking into that. The support for Oracle applications, and being able to do these things on the edge, especially in virtualized environments. We can run Nonstop on HPE's EdgeLine platforms, which is their edge computing platform. And you really have access. There's no limitations in what how you want to access this database in terms of JDBC, ODBC, the persistence that Java supports, Hibernate if you're doing object type queries. Liquibase allows you to have sort of a floating schema within the multi-tenancies. If your schema changes, Liquibase allows this to blend in with really no downtime. We're offering NSDA, which is a new platform that allows you to do query management, direct query management on the Nonstop. It looks as it has the capability of looking at queries like we look at transactions. That was sort of a missing component that's now been filled by the NSDA product. So we've done a lot of work with the database. So if you haven't looked at it in a while, we definitely suggest taking a look at it. So these new solutions actually accelerate and add value to either porting existing applications onto Nonstop and or developing applications on Nonstop. So if we look at middleware, frameworks, languages, we're supporting frameworks, Spring and Boot, and a lot of these things that are out in the industry. The path sockets allows us to get in there. We're allowing a lot of TSMP enhancements. We talked about the sockets library. API Gateway is just being released right now on the L2106 release. So API Gateway has come out, and kernel level threading is coming out probably fairly soon. This is our ability to take more advantage of the cores on the system. We're supporting a lot of different languages now. Java we've supported for a long time, but Python, Kotlin, Scala, a lot of these new languages that are coming out that make things easier. In terms of the database, I already mentioned SQL MX and IMC, but we've also are launching database as a service through the multi-tenancy now. And this is offering through HPE's GreenLake capability now. This is the cloud that comes to you if you've listened to any of the Discover pitches from HPE. GreenLake is our private cloud. We can build it in your data center or build it in a colo, and you are charged based on consumption. So it's a good way of getting into the cloud. It's very competitive with the cloud. It gives you all the cloud features and functionality that you like, but a little bit more control. I mentioned the database compatibility, some of the other products that are around. And if we look into the software and services infrastructure, how well does Nonstop fit into the existing environment, into the existing infrastructure and data centers? We're doing a lot of open source tools. We're recommending Eclipse. If you look at DevOps, we're supporting Jenkins, Git, Ansible, all the other things. In terms of database, Liquibase, and some of other disaster recovery capabilities. If you're looking at some of the logging capabilities that are coming out, open tracing, Zipkin, Elk integration, all these things are available on the Nonstop, allows it to be integrated very easily into existing environments. So the idea is you can take your existing systems and you don't really have to do anything to them. Just let them continue to run. We can support the new middleware options here with REST, JSON, and HTTP and the other things there. We can put in our database middleware product. If you're using an Inscribe right now, we can get you to MP, which can be controlled by MX. So there's an easy path to get to MX. And then allow you to develop new microservices. So we see again this combination of the classic core architecture systems that are in there, and also the new agile development environment that can be done on the platform. So to give an example, this is a European bank. There was a new CIO that came in. He was very aggressive, wanted to do a lot of innovation, shake things up. He wanted best of breed. And the existing solutions were considered legacy systems. So he came in and considered nonstop legacy that was running COBOL Inscribe pathway. And really wasn't considering that. There was no access to the services. We didn't offer any modern UIs in his view. And he was finding it difficult to hire COBOL developers and nonstop staff. Well, we sort of gave the modernization pitch, and he decided to give things a try. So he did put in this middleware hook, which really opened up the database. He felt like with the Inscribe database, it was really locked. He couldn't use the tools, Tableau and Click and some of the other modern reporting tools and dashboard tools that he wanted to use. By going to MX or allowing that exposure, it immediately allowed the data on Nonstop to be unlocked. So it could get into these reporting tools, into these dashboards, into the monitoring of the system. So he took the second step and decided to throw some of his developers that were not Nonstop developers onto the platform to develop some microservices. So he took these from other platforms, had them develop some microservices on Nonstop. It did, in fact, transparently inherit the scalability and availability. So the CIO became a believer in the platform, found it very cost effective. They didn't have to disrupt the existing services that were on the system. He was able to develop microservices and have really a quick time to market. He was able to use modern technologies, bash shells, modern techniques, open source tools on the Nonstop, standard APIs. It did fit into his DevOps environment. So it was a very good experience for him. We think it'll be a good experience for you. So there's various modernization domains, and we feel at the moment Nonstop has them all covered. User interfaces, with the API gateway and the more service orientation. We have this information layer, which allows Nonstop to participate with other monitoring and dashboard tools. We're supporting really all the DevOps tools in terms of management and automation. We're fitting into other logging systems, into SIEM environments, and pretty much anything you'd like. In terms of security, you may have heard all the Zypro security products are now being on the Nonstop price list and sold out of us. So we have a lot of security capabilities now. And also the Comforte and our other partners, we have really zero trust, multi-factor authentication, tokenization, all these things available, and standard execution environment. So we feel we're covering this pretty well. So Nonstop innovation allows you to capture these business outcomes. It allows you to step into this new agile Scrum Sprint high-speed environment, but put it on a platform that will easily allow it to transition into the standard and automated and cost-effective area of IT. So we think it improves your business outcomes by taking advantage of these modern tools. And not only can HPE help, but our partners can certainly help you achieve this new modern environment. So with that, I'm going to conclude the talk, and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll check and see if there's any questions that have come in. The only thing I see is that I was willing to stop and answer questions. So if there's any questions, please, by all means, we'll open it up. And if not, we can transition to the second talk.
You guess we're pretty darn clear there, Justin, on and complete on your.
I was way too clear. Let's go to a deep discussion on pass sockets.
Got to throw a few confusing things in there. Well, that's great. Thank you very much, Justin. Really appreciate your talk and spending time with us today.
Oh yeah, no problem. I'll hang on in case questions do come up.
Okay, great. Our next speaker is from CSP. And I don't know if Dale's on the line. Dale was going to introduce the CSP speaker. Dale, are you on the line? Let's see.
Maybe Henry was going to do the introduction.
Yeah, I guess Henry was, there you go. Henry, are you on the line and we're going to do an introduction of the speaker? I think he was on earlier. I'm just looking.
Henry's online. He's just on mute.
He's on mute. There he is. Okay.
Doesn't even have a microphone.
Or if we've lost Henry. Henry, you are on mute if you're speaking and you're wondering why we're not responding. We'll give him a minute or so. Rob, is that coffee ready for us yet?
I've already finished mine. So
Oh, where's ours?
why don't you, Jack? Why don't you go ahead and make the introduction to keep the presentation going?
Sure. I'm not sure if we have the CSP speaker here. If not, maybe we'll move on to the next speaker. Oh, there's Steve. Okay, here we go. We got Steve, but he was after CSP. Maybe Steve is ready to do his now. Steve, can you hear us? Like he's just in the middle of connecting. I see a bunch connecting right now. We'll give them a couple minutes to connect.
Jack, I could always have Alexa entertain us.
Yeah, she does a pretty good job. It's taking a couple minutes to connect. I see he's still connecting. Let's see. You know, we could go through a Zoom meeting without a little excitement there. I think it's built into the software that if things are running smoothly, they're going to throw a little glitch in. It looks like they're,
Hey, Justin, maybe you want to tell us a little more about Green Lake.
I'd love to tell you more about Green Lake.
You know, because you talk about this private cloud stuff and clouds,
Yes.
and everywhere I turn at work, they're talking cloud this, AWS that, Google Cloud that. So where does HPE nonstop land in that? Have you sold some nonstops to AWS or Google to
We
do something?
Well,
Maybe you can't say.
we have so the HPE thrust has been Green Lake itself, and Green Lake is really a private cloud that HPE comes in and builds in your data center up front. HPE bears all the cost in that. And what you do is use that in a very cloud-like fashion, launching stuff, bringing things up, whatnot like this. And HPE charges you based on your usage, and they'll build in extra capability. They'll put in like 20%, 30% more than you need, with the idea that you're probably going to grow into that or expand into that as you take advantage of this. So that's the idea behind Green Lake. It gives you the cloud experience without throwing all your data into a public cloud, or there are other issues with public cloud. Now, does Nonstop participate in this? Yes, it does. It's a little great. The Green Lake folks, we'll do a little dirty laundry here in HPE, right? The Green Lake idea is this whole cloud environment where you're launching stuff very agile, very Scrum-like. You're bringing things up. You're running, 100 machines at one point, then you drop down to 50, then you go up to 150, and then down to 75. And this is sort of floating what you need over the month. And they were a little put off, I think, by our nonstop model, where we launch something and we don't ever let it go, right? It doesn't float. It just stays there forever. So our consumption model, they finally figured out, oh, you're like 100% consumption. Yes, we are. So when let's say you take a virtual nonstop system that has 10 processors, along with the clems and everything else, we'll launch the cores it takes to do that, and you're just billed at 100% consumption rate for that. Now, we are looking into being able to do this based on, we can certainly feed the Green Lake model with whatever capabilities they'd like. There's a little API that goes into their monitoring tool, and we basically can provide them more information than they want. So we can do monitoring to a certain extent if it looks like we're going to do a somewhat more usage billing than consumption billing. The way Green Lake does is based on cores that are used. We always use the cores, so what we're looking is more, we're using 80% of the core, or 60% or something like that. So that thing is still a little bit in flux as how we're going to do a consumption bill for nonstop, but we are actively engaged in it. So, and we have done some Green Lake nonstop sales. So I'm happy to answer questions on Green Lake if you want.
Thank you. Steve still doesn't have a mic.
Yeah. It is, we HPE, the greater HPE, has found some customers that have just decided, they're going to roll the dice and throw everything into AWS or Azure. And they've gotten in there and found out, like these core legacy applications that run all the time, it's pretty expensive in the public cloud. So some of them have come back out again. So Green Lake hopes to capture that sort of business where you want the cloud experience, but you don't necessarily want all the billing and the stuff. In fact, there was this one unnamed customer I have that threw all their data in there and realized they wanted to do analytics outside the cloud, and they had to pay, I think, a $21 million penalty to get their own data back. So data goes in, it doesn't come out very well. Sometimes.
Hey, Justin, looks like Ron Thompson has a question for you in the chat.
Oh, okay. Oh, hey, Ron, how are you? Good to see you on here. If you look staying on this, what's the plan to engage decision makers? Well, that's good. Yeah, in terms of getting in front of the decision makers, you probably know that there is a new North American sales manager, Kevin Chabot, and he actually has an agenda item to the nonstop reps to give this modernization pitch to executives, directors, CIOs in our existing accounts. So he's trying to get up the chain that way. We're also looking at offering some new applications on Nonstop. We're in discussions now with about 3 or 4 potentially new applications that may be running on Nonstop, maybe announced soon. And Kevin Chabot is doing the customer council, which is also involved with getting executives into actually our executive briefing center and talking about Nonstop and the directions onto it. I have to say that Kevin Chabot has done a lot too in terms of engaging Nonstop HPE upper management and executives in looking at implementing Nonstop, like in Green Lake and some of the other things that are coming out, the Edgeline stuff. HPE is very focused on this edge to cloud and analytics everywhere message.
Hey, Kevin, Mark Wilson. I'm on this session with you. I see that now Steve's got a microphone, so. Oh.
Hi, I'm here. Hi, hey.
So Ron, to sum up, we are doing a lot to try to get more executive awareness and brief them on Nonstop. And we'll talk more about that. I did get your email, so I owe you a response on that.
Thank you.
So Steve, I guess you're available now?
I apologize. I was on another call. I didn't realize my time was already there.
I finished early, Steve.
I was thinking Justin could go on for another 3 hours.
You'd think, yeah. I sort of flew through that modernization pitch for some reason. I don't know. I just sort of flowed out, and I thought,
Yep.
And to my buddy Steve now.
Okay, happy to jump in.
Good to see you, Steve.
You too, Justin. Thanks. Okay, give me 1 second. Oh, I can't share my screen.
Oh, okay.
It says it's been disabled.
Jack will make you a co-host here in just a second.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, you're good to go for sharing your screen anyway. We can see your screen.
Okay, enterprise integration, right?
That's it.
It is.
All right, awesome. So good morning, everyone. I apologize for the tardiness. I was stuck on another call, but I also thought I was much later in the day. So thanks, Justin, for the transition. We're going to be talking about enterprise integration for Nonstop and some of the new technologies that Zypro has that's come out to the market right now that we've got a variety of customers using that are going to help you leverage your existing enterprise investments and make sure that Nonstop can play nicely with those. So a little bit about Zypro. I'm sure most of you are already familiar with it. I'm Steve Churchin, by the way. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Zypro. So I'm responsible for all of technology, product management, support, delivery, go-to-market on the Zypro side. A little bit about Zypro. We're in sunny Southern California. It's in the 90s this week, so can't beat that. We've got expertise in nonstop cybersecurity, compliance, and database management with a globally distributed sales and support organization. So we've got folks all around the world Strong partnership with HPE. In fact, our entire product suite now is offered through HPE, including Zygate Security One, as well as the only SailPoint and CyberArk certified integrations for Nonstop. So we'll talk, that's what we're going to be focusing our talk on today in our patented security intelligence technology with Zygate Security One. So I love to have these sessions be as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, thoughts, comments, if you want to expand on a topic, please feel free, just chime in and let's have a dialogue. Okay. So Zypro is ultimately your trusted security partner. Our main focuses are around integration, which is going to be our talk today, modernization of the platform to make sure that the Nonstop can be brought into existing enterprise workloads and workflows. And innovating is looking at what's next and how Nonstop can better take advantage of the newer technologies and trends that are taking over the IT market. We talked about our strategic technology partnerships. We'll see on the next slide. And we've got a global 24/7 support organization spread across the world. And we're in fact fluent in 24 different languages. So customers call up on from a variety of countries, and we're able to support them in a different language other than English if they're more comfortable. The technology partnerships we're going to be focusing on today primarily are going to be around CyberArk, SailPoint, RSA, and ServiceNow. But also, if you see a logo on, or if you don't see a logo on here that you have in your environment that you want the Nonstop to integrate with, come let us know. We're probably working on something in the background. So this is just skimming the surface of the partnerships that we have. We've got some skunkworks projects in the background to bring more and more integration into existing enterprise technologies. So the first thing I want to talk about is a Zygate user authentication. This is shipped with every Nonstop platform. So if you've got a Nonstop, you've got the ability, you've got Zygate user authentication. So you've got the ability to turn on and utilize two-factor or multi-factor authentication. You've got the ability to integrate with Active Directory. You've got the ability to integrate with other LDAP providers, as well as you get a bunch of granular controls when it comes to authentication. Plus, XUA will enhance your authentication audit data. Now, this becomes critical when you need to do analytics, threat detection, or other types of correlation and contextualization, because without XUA in the picture running as your security event exit process, your SEEP, you're going to have gaps in your authentication data. The Nonstop, for example, when you're coming over an encrypted session, will typically show the loopback IP address of the originator of that connection. If you're familiar with the audit logs, you'll see 127.0.0.1 in your audit for an encrypted session. With XUA as your SEEP, you're going to see the real source IP address of that connection. So then now that gives you the power to do all kinds of threat detection, like I talked about, and different types of analytics on your authentication data. You've already got XUA. I'm not selling anything. There's nothing to purchase. Almost every cybersecurity framework requires multi-factor authentication. And with PCI DSS 4.0 on the horizon, it's going to be here at the end of this year. They're in fact going to be doubling down on multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication gives you the best bang for your buck when it comes to security. In today's world, it's having a username and password is no longer security. We'll talk about some of the fallacies with that reliance on just a username and password, but turn it on, you've got it, you start using it and getting the protection from multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, Steve, it seems like most companies now, I would think, would start requiring multi-factor authentication, especially in sort of the zero trust environment. So, it's great that that's available.
Yeah, it blows my mind that that's not the mandate. And there's a variety of reasons that get thrown out of why they're not using multi-factor authentication, but until their hand is forced, that's seeming to be the norm. PCI with zero trust and PCI DSS 4.0, multi-factor is not only going to be forced on the endpoints themselves. So previously, multi-factor was enforced on the perimeter. For example, if you log into the VPN and you've got MFA on the VPN, you're authenticated. Now you have free access to the network. You don't have to re-authenticate yourself. With 3.2, we saw more requirements around having multi-factor on the servers themselves or on the endpoints themselves. And with 4.0, we're going to see even further with that methodology is having multi-factor on your endpoints, your servers, and even your applications. And that's what we're talking about here is application multi-factor authentication. So having the same multi-factor authentication capabilities that you have logging into the platform can now be extended to your nonstop applications. This is an add-on to XUA. So you purchase a module either through HPE or through Zypro, and you can now modernize your legacy applications or your nonstop applications with multi-factor authentication. So things like Base24, or if you've got a custom nonstop application or a legacy application that you've been running for, however many years that you need to bring into the multi-factor world, this plugin, this library for XUA will allow you to do that. All it is a screen and a library that sits between your authentication screen and your application. So you would give your credentials like you would normally to log into the application. And before you can move over, you'll get prompted with a screen like this, asking you for your MFA credentials. Now, when we're talking about MFA, this can be connected to RSA Secure ID. It can be connected to Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator. If you've got a Microsoft NPS server, we can work with that. Plus, later on this year, we're going to be delivering functionality for OAuth 2, SAML, and integrations with things like Okta, Duo, Ping, Centrify, and other authentication providers. So if you're using any of these technologies, let us know, please, and we'll make sure that you can integrate your applications and your server using MFA with these providers. Any questions on this before I move on?
I'd use this not for just legacy applications, but also for new microservices that I'd be developing on Nonstop.
Absolutely. The library is there. You can attach it to anything. So as long as you can call this library modify your source code and call this library, you're going to have MFA capabilities, which means you don't have to build MFA capabilities into your application. Just a couple of screenshots of what the Base24 workflow would look like. Okay. The next integration we're going to be talking about is our Zygate Identity Connector. Now, these are two separate products, one for SailPoint, one for CyberArk. In most customer environments, you're going to have a nonstop server, you're going to have SailPoint, and you're going to have CyberArk. That means you've got multiple technologies providing different purposes there that the nonstop would need to integrate with. Now, SailPoint is the market leader when it comes to identity and access management, and CyberArk is the market leader in privileged session management. So they provide two separate things. They've actually got a strong partnership, and now HPE Nonstop can be brought into the picture and plug into SailPoint and CyberArk just like any other application. Windows, Linux, Salesforce, Exchange, Azure, whatever you want to think of now, Nonstop can play into that picture. So when it comes to SailPoint, what was happening before this connector existed is you'd go into SailPoint when you onboard a new employee, you'd put in their credentials in, and then you create an identity and you would select what applications and servers that identity needed access to. So you can go in and select Salesforce, Exchange, Workday, whatever, as options. Now, Nonstop wasn't an option there. So what would happen is you would send an email to a Nonstop administrator asking them to create a user ID for this identity. They'd go in there, pick up the ticket, and manually create the user ID. So now the user has access, but that ID is disconnected from SailPoint. What was happening that was more critical was the deprovisioning process. That means removing the user ID from the system after that employee is no longer either employed or moved into a different role. Typical workflow is you'd go into SailPoint and disable that identity, which would automatically disable all of the user IDs that identity had access to. Nonstop was a manual process. Somebody sends an email to a Nonstop administrator. They would then go and pick up that ticket and disable the identity's user ID. Now, in most cases, that wasn't happening until an auditor or regulator noticed that there were stale IDs or accounts that were on the system for more than 30 days longer than they should have been. So they get dinged for that. We had a variety of customers come to us and said, can you help us with this problem? Can you help us automate this SailPoint provisioning and deprovisioning process with Nonstop? So we worked with SailPoint and developed the first and only SailPoint certified integration for Nonstop. So if you call SailPoint, or now if you call HP and say, how can I integrate Nonstop with SailPoint? They're going to point you to this connector. What this did is took the deprovisioning process, like I said, from 30 plus days down to minutes, because it's all automated. No human intervention. Nonstop now is an option in SailPoint, just like any other IT asset. Similarly with CyberArk, in most environments, CyberArk is your enterprise password vault. That means all of your credentials should be stored in the vault. Storing username and passwords in an Excel file on your desktop called password.xls is not password management. So in most enterprise environments, you're going to have CyberArk's EPV as your enterprise vault. Your super password and all your other passwords would go in there. Typical workflow is a user who needs access to super would go in a CyberArk, check out the super password and be assigned a temporary password for, let's say, 4 hours. They could then take that super password, log into Nonstop, and do what they needed to do. After the 4 hours are up, CyberArk will automatically rotate the password within CyberArk. So the password has been changed. The problem is there's no connectivity between CyberArk and Nonstop. So that user who checked out that password for 4 hours now has access to the system for longer than was intended, until an administrator goes in there and reconciles, manually changes the Nonstop password to match what's in CyberArk. Time-consuming process, manual process, and a big security risk. So similarly, we had customers come to us and say, can you help us solve this problem? We need this process automated. We need CyberArk to manage all of our Nonstop passwords. So we worked in conjunction with CyberArk and developed an integration that as soon as that password gets rotated in CyberArk, that password is automatically changed in Nonstop. So if a user goes into CyberArk, checks out the password for 4 hours, and then CyberArk rotates that password, that user loses access as soon as that password is rotated. So the passwords are always in sync, no manual intervention. Security is paramount when it comes to this methodology. Now, the other thing that we did is enhance this connector to not just manage Nonstop or Guardian passwords, rather. You can also vault and manage your CLIM passwords and your Nonstop console passwords. So those can go into the enterprise vault, and you get the same benefits of password policy management, password rotation, no manual processes for your Nonstop CLIM passwords and your console passwords that you do for your Guardian passwords. This is a very easy to install, very lightweight microservice. It's a REST API. It's end-to-end encrypted. And again, this is the only certified solution that exists for Nonstop. Any questions on the identity connector for SailPoint or CyberArk? Okay, the third integration, or the fourth rather, is with ServiceNow. In most IT environments, you're going to have ServiceNow ITSM as your problem, change, and incident ticket management system. And in most environments, you're going to have a combination of Nonstop, SailPoint, CyberArk, and ServiceNow. So this is where the integration aspect comes in. A lot of the CIOs and CTOs in our customer environments are all about integration and automation. They want to make sure that all of their IT assets can be managed the same way. So if they spend a ton of money on ServiceNow, on SailPoint, on CyberArk, on RSA, the Nonstop should be able to participate seamlessly, just like other IT assets. And these integrations will allow you to do that. The ServiceNow integration is an add-on to Zygate Access Control. So if you've already got Zygate Access Control, you just call Zypro or you call HPE, and you get a license to turn on this feature. If you don't have Zygate Access Control, the entire package is available with Zygate Access Control along with this add-on module. Its main purpose is to implement or enforce zero trust security. So a typical workflow without this integration would be that you'd have XAC, you'd run a privilege command, and what would happen is a lot of our customers ended up inserting a workflow that would capture, for example, the ticket number, the user that was running the command, and a variety of other factors or attributes. That would then go into a database or a flat file, which would be reconciled once a week. Somebody would pull that record out, pull that report out, go to ServiceNow and say, user A ran this command. Is there an appropriate ticket in ServiceNow for this user to run this command on this system at this time using this syntax? If there isn't, then you'd go and do some interrogation and forensic work to see what happened. The problem is it's already happened in the past. So you're looking at something after the fact. What this will do is, even though that user has access to run the command on that system, a privilege command on that system, because XAC allows them to do, unless ServiceNow gives the thumbs up or gives you an allow or a deny to execute that command's not going to execute. This enforces a zero trust model, because even though they have access, you don't know unless you verify with ServiceNow that it's the right person running the command on the right system using the right syntax at the right time for the right purpose. ServiceNow is flexible enough to, this integration with ServiceNow is flexible enough to validate on a variety of attributes. So you can validate on a couple of attributes, or you can validate on 20 attributes, however you have ServiceNow configured. This add-on will allow you to read ServiceNow appropriately. Again, eliminates complex after the fact manual effort required with matching nonstop commands with what's in ServiceNow. Licensable add-on module to XAC. If you've already got it and you've got ServiceNow in your environment, you've got to have this. It's just going to make you much more secure, allow you to have a much more better peace of mind when it comes to who's doing what on your system. It also will help with PCI DSS compliance around change control and configuration management. Again, it's a lightweight module that gets added on to XAC. It's a REST API. Everything's encrypted end-to-end. Now, and that takes us to the end of our talk. I know, Justin, Jack, I only had about 15 minutes for this, right? I just want to make sure that I wasn't expected to go any longer than 15.
No, that's great.
Okay.
That was perfect, Steve. Thank you very much. It worked out very well.
Okay, great.
I understand the next speaker. I think Henry is all ready for us anyway. He had some issues with the phone, or he had some issues with connecting, but he switched to phone.
Yeah.
Can
you hear me, Jack?
I can hear you. Did you have to use a rotary phone, or did you? It was the regular phone?
Yeah, it was a rotary phone. I had to go get it from my attic. Yeah.
Okay. Great, Henry. You're on. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Let me share my screen. Okay, it says it looks like my screen sharing is disabled.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, you probably. I'll fix that right now.
Sure. Probably because I had to disconnect.
Okay.
And Steve probably needs to stop sharing his.
Yeah, Steve, can you stop sharing your screen?
I'm just scrolling through the. Oh, there we go. Okay. Take 1 sec.
Sure.
Uh,
Steve left the building.
okay. You should be able to. There we go. Share.
Yep, perfect. And you can see my screen.
Beautiful.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Sorry about the, I know we were running a little bit early. I was ready and I could hear everyone trying to find me. I just couldn't unmute from the screen for some reason. But I did a reboot of everything, and that usually solves the problem. So here we are. Okay, thank you for joining the first virtual CTUG event. Hopefully next time we host a large event, we'll be able to be in person. My name is Henry Fonseca, and I am CSP's General Manager. And today we're going to be talking about how you can secure your non-stop applications effectively with multi-factor authentication. So following that theme that Steve went through, we also see multi-factor authentication as an important part of securing your non-stop applications. But before we get into multi-factor authentication, let me just give you a brief overview of CSP's solution suite. So we have security solutions for both Guardian and the OSS environment. So we have Audit View, which is our powerful auditing and reporting tool, and Alert Plus, which provides real-time alerts on security events. It reads from your Safeguard base, Base24, and other CSP products as well. Then we have Protect XP, which allows you to easily manage and review Safeguard settings and file permissions. We have Verify Elite, which is our new compliance and file integrity monitoring. Okay. We have CSP Passport, which is our user access and session control. Authenticator Plus, which is our multi-factor authentication solution, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And also ProtectX. Okay, let's get right into it. So, COVID has proven that there is no circumstance that hackers will not seek to exploit. They know that the confusion caused by this worldwide pandemic can be used to try to steal sensitive information from individuals and organizations alike. We haven't seen, throughout the pandemic, we've seen many cyber attacks continue to happen. They're constantly making headlines, so that's not something that stopped just because we were in the middle of a global pandemic. So now hackers are tapping into the wealth of insecurely protected data and hiding behind this confusion while reaping the rewards. And organizations are aware of these attacks, but many still don't seem to realize just how dangerous and sophisticated hackers have become. Many organizations are still not taking the necessary steps to protect their critical data, and some companies continue to rely on simple password security and spend their money on implementing security practices that don't really address those latest hacking techniques. Like Steve said, having a password spreadsheet with all your passwords stored there is not really the safest way to manage passwords, and using password 123 as your password for critical applications is not really effectively securing your applications. And that's where MFA comes in. It works by requiring the use of more than one strong authentication factor in order to access sensitive information. It would be the difference, for example, between just using a key to get into your house and using a key plus, a biometric scan. We all understand that data security protocols are only as good as your weakest link, and nothing is weaker than someone in the back office using password as their default for every application. Now, specifically, why is multi-factor authentication so critical for Nonstop? First, it provides superior identity verification and security. It also ensures compliance with regulations, and it's required for all personnel with non-console administrative access and all personnel with remote access to your cardholder data environment, And this comes directly from PCI version 3.2. Now, passwords have been used for centuries as a way to protect people and information. In the early years of technology, it seemed like the best solution for controlling access to systems with sensitive data. But over the years, passwords and password encryption methods have become more complex. As they improve, though, so have the skills of cyber criminals. And even decent passwords can be easily cracked, which is why MFA is so critical for Nonstop applications. And as consumers, we've all seen a number of providers improve the security of their online and mobile applications by adding MFA. For example, you can set up multi-factor authentication for your the accounts that are handled by Google, for example, or to access your Gmail. Banking applications are now using it. They're asking for everything from verifying your identity through push notifications on your phone, or even using the biometric scans on your phone to give you that second layer of security. And we've developed CSP Authenticator Plus, which is our solution for multi-factor authentication. It's a self-hosted web application that provides a user-friendly interface. It can be deployed on Linux, Windows, or Mac. This allows for standardized authentication across multiple platforms. And the RESTful interface provides support for primary and secondary authentication. In fact, that's one of the key features for CSP Authenticator Plus, is that it supports a number of primary authentication methods, such as Radius, Active Directory, LDAP, and RSA Cloud. It's also a highly customizable solution. We can customize it to your specific requirements, and it offers support for many secondary authentication methods right out of the box. Now, the Nonstop agent supports Safeguard SEEP and Pathway interface for tackle and application logons. So that means you can now enable MFA logins for different applications, making them more secure. Some of the key features for Authenticator Plus: it supports various authentication methods. It can provide authentication services via Safeguard Authentication SEEP or Pathway and non-Pathway servers, like I mentioned before. Almost any application now, including Tackle, can now easily support MFA. Authentication methods such as Radius, RSA Cloud, Active Directory, and Open LDAP apps are supported. And the additional authentication methods include RSA Secure ID, email, text message, and Google Authenticator. These are the primary authentication methods that are included. Anything that supports LDAP really can be used as a primary authentication method. Some of the ones that we get requests for constantly are Active Directory, obviously, but also we've seen some customer requests for Radius and RSA Cloud. Authenticator Plus verifies a user and password, and if the user does not have the primary authentication setup, then it'll default to your safeguard settings. So it's not really something that you have to enable if you don't want to, but it's there if you want to use it. And that's the whole thing behind how we designed this, is the flexibility that it's going to allow users to set it up as they need to for their organization. And one thing that's not mentioned here, but we are working on it and we're hoping to release it later this year, is LDAP user right synchronization, which will mean that you'll now be able to integrate Nonstop into the corporate authentication platform. And that's something really big that we're working on, and I know a lot of our users are hoping we get off the ground soon. Now, your secondary authentication methods include RSA Secure ID, email, text message, and Google Authenticator. Due to its flexibility, like I mentioned, Authenticator Plus can easily support additional secondary authentication methods based on your specific requirements. Now, I usually do a demo to show you how easy it is to just set this up, but we unfortunately don't have time for that. But you can go to our website, cspsecurity.com, and under the video section, you can see a little demo. It's no longer than 5 minutes, I think, or probably 3 minutes, to show you how the administrator will set up Authenticator Plus, both primary and secondary authentication methods for a user, and then how that user would activate it, and finally how that user would use CSP Authenticator Plus to log on to an application. Now, before I conclude my presentation, I just want to give you a preview of some of the new features that we're working on for Authenticator Plus, and some of the upcoming releases and enhancements that we have for our solutions. We have a major upgrade to CSP Passport. It's going to make it more efficient with several improvements. Verify Elite has a new and improved user interface. It now includes binder timestamp and EMS logging features. And regarding Authenticator Plus specifically, we are implementing hybrid cloud support, Kubernetes support for deployments, and also high availability support for the web server. Okay, I know my time is almost up here, so just some final concluding thoughts. We've seen that user access, command control, file integrity monitoring, and multi-factor authentication are all critical compliance requirements for nonstop systems. And CSP provides a suite of solutions that can make your nonstop systems more secure while ensuring that your compliance requirements are met. Okay, if anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to go over them now, or you can email me or message me directly. Jack, I think that's almost my time. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'll take them now. If not, thank you for your time. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Great. Thank you very much, Henry.
No
Any questions for Henry, you can put in the chat and he could answer them now, or you can answer them a little bit later on.
Perfect. Thanks, Jack.
Okay, great. Thanks again, Henry. Our next speaker and the final one for today is, I guess, Dave, are you going to introduce Mark? Or
yes, yeah, I'd be happy to. So certainly thanks to everybody for joining our first virtual event. And we look forward to seeing everybody in person as soon as possible. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Mark Bauer. He's our Executive VP of Product and Market Strategy. And he gets involved in just about everything from new product enhancements, product capabilities, and live customer projects. So he's got his fingers in just about everything. And so I'll let him continue on with his presentation. Thanks for joining. Are you there, Mark?
So can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, we got you.
There we go. Couldn't find the mute button as usual. Yes, so I've got a quick action-packed presentation today. So thank you very much for allowing us to participate. I think many of you may know Conforte from our HP nonstop capabilities, but many of you may not know that we've also expanded quite dramatically to cover the applications and processes outside. And certainly the platform capabilities span an intelligent way to find data, be it sensitive structured data that's spread throughout the enterprise, and then protect it on an end-to-end basis, leveraging the technologies that we pioneered on the nonstop platform. So in the world today that we see around us that involves data, we've seen a shift to what we see now as privacy regulations that were really spawned by GDPR in Europe, but we've certainly seen them spread around the world, whether it's in the United States with the various states implementing here, the latest one was Virginia, California was the first, or whether somebody's operating in Brazil under the LGPD laws, or South Africa with POPIA. They're all practically the same in terms of new responsibilities to protect information. And in fact, the way to think about this is that data is no longer simply collected and used. It's essentially donated to businesses under consent. And there are a lot of controls and protection requirements that come around that. At the same time, organizations are in their transformation processes, which really never ends. And in this case, we're typically talking about the refactoring of applications to modern cloud architectures, which extend core processing platforms into these new realms of hyper-agile ecosystems, in particular, machine learning technologies. And of course, traditional controls like access rights, data at rest protection, data in motion protection, they're all powerful, but they certainly don't work well when the ecosystem is in such a dramatic state of change and the data goes everywhere. We need a new way to protect that information. And the ecosystem more or less looks a little bit like this. So when we think about operational environments, moving data into the science platforms, we might have our classic mission critical ecosystems, but often combined with sensors and devices, putting data into use in operational systems, but also moving that information along with operational data up into these very aggressively changing science platforms. And the problem here is that data scientists themselves are exploring data that is essentially looking for the unknowns in the unknown patterns. And so having access to the maximum data with the maximum number of flexible tools gives the kind of outcomes that people are looking for, but that in itself comes with its own inherent risks and exposures. And of course, that drives the need for a way to protect data to balance this utility and use and risk of and compliance. Now, if we think of classic data protection, so data at rest encryption, data in motion protection, access controls, they often leave many gaps as we decrypt data that comes out of a database, data that moves into another process or is handled by people. And all of these present substantial risks: malware attacks, ransomware, insiders, or accidents from misconfigurations. And not a day goes by without us hearing about data breaches or compliance violations. And of course, when you get into these modern environments where we're using microservices and serverless compute, the scale of the data processing environment goes up, the amount of change is substantial, but the same kinds of controls are often applied. And so the ability to close these gaps with an end-to-end model becomes even more important for compliance and risk reduction when we're in these extended hyperagile ecosystems. So the way we address this, which is a technique that was perfected by Conforte on the Nonstop platform for achieving PCI compliance and personal data protection, and those very sophisticated and powerful database processing on that platform, we've extended this to modern applications to allow us to have transparent protection, taking data that would have been sensitive, essentially randomizing it, still inheriting the properties of the original data. So what is stored in databases and lakes still stays protected. And on access, granting very granular controls that ties back to privilege and authorization. And so we can now start to control information. And if we have attacks to data, then the attackers get nothing of value. We've neutralized the risk. And Conforte, along with other vendors and the financial industry, helped build a standard around this, an ANSI X9 standard that's let me just admit this person. There we go. So this is a standards-based approach that we help pioneer. But the technology itself, while very interesting and powerful, is only as good as how fast you can deploy it and expand it across an ecosystem that is in constant change, whether we're moving data into Kubernetes environments, public cloud, or into analytic environments, which might change on a day-to-day basis, or even in the test and dev environment. It's critical that we can implement this in a transparent way. So I'm going to tell you a story very briefly about a large Fortune 500 that had a combination of classic infrastructure and was going on this transformation journey and faced two major problems. One was a data privacy deadline, which was driven by NACHA regulations. So if you're not familiar with those, if you're processing banking information like routing details, account numbers, and the personal data that comes with that, the regulation was deferred from last year for compliance in July this year. So take a look at some of our blogs that cover this in detail if you like. But essentially, you can think of it like PCI for bank account information. So this organization, as with many, was on its journey to transformation and to modern cloud architectures, refactoring applications, rebuilding for this data engineering and science environment. When it started to look under the hood, it had a whole gamut of different problems of protected, unprotected data across both traditional apps, SaaS applications, and their machine learning environment. And in particular, there was one problem that was a really challenging one to solve that no doubt is familiar to you, because this company had this challenge. So this is an example of some data that was going into a database, a major claims processing environment. And if you think about your experiences with insurance, when you call up, you talk to an agent, the agent often captures a whole array of personal data. Well, in this case, it was going into a major database for things like quoting and claims processing. And despite the fact that the agents were told never put personal data into these types of free-form text fields, they did it every single time. And it kind of looked like this information here. When you think about the millions of entries here, this was a substantial breach concern. So what we're able to do with this transparent protection approach is, in place, protect the individual personal data elements while preserving the rest of the data automatically. And so now, as this data moves out to its science environment, the data is de-risked as it is in the production systems. The science can be preserved, like sentiment, like customer complaining or very angry. The data can then be used for analysis, and when somebody needs to act, we can go back to the original customer and then operate on them. So we've literally created this end-to-end approach which can automatically protect personal data in a very short period of time. So overall, the challenge they had was protecting data in these operational platforms, the claims processing environment, moving this data up into these analytic environments. And they could have tried to do this with traditional approaches, but certainly it would have been a bit of a headache for them, to say the least. And the transparent approach that I mentioned solved some of these problems for them in short order. They started to look at their nurture problem late last year and was able to implement the protection that I've described, that free-form protection in their core system in about a month's time, so extremely rapidly. And a traditional approach of trying to do this with APIs, reprogramming the application, making changes, would have been at least 4 to 5 times that and required far more resources. The other side to this was they had master data management systems from companies like Informatica, which were off the shelf, not easy to implement and integrate into. And so a transparent approach here was also able to solve this problem very, very rapidly. So this helped get them through to the problems in their operational environment in short order. But because the data was protected at source and could move and retain those properties and be used in science, it was very easy to start to use it for modeling in their Google BigQuery environment in the cloud. So just briefly, I've described a quick use case through the lens of a customer. Obviously, we do this for our classic clients on the nonstop, but the use cases here for overall in the enterprise tend to revolve around securing production data, like I described, protecting non-production data, like the analytic environment or even test and dev, helping organizations secure workloads moving up and into the cloud, and to retrofit security to those complex mission-critical applications that might well feed these modern architectures and be part of a data engineering strategy. And behind the scenes, this is done with a cloud-native approach. So this platform is being built for these ecosystems. It's able to be implemented from the development platform, so from a DevOps perspective, from what you think of as the CI/CD frameworks, and therefore transparently are consumed by the business. So infrastructure that can be very quickly utilized with short time to value, similar to that I described. So that's the end of my show. I'd left a couple of minutes for questions if there are any. And what I can do too is put a little link in the chat for questions if you have a need to have a look at some of our materials on this with various white papers and case studies, including some of the non-stop materials as well. So I'll open the door for questions.
That was great, Mark. Thanks very much.
You're most welcome. And if there are any questions afterwards, you can contact myself or Dave, and I'll also pop my email address in the in the chat there as well.
Well, thank you, Mark Bauer. Really enjoyed your session. And I guess that is the last speaker for today. We're very efficient in our timing. So it gives me an opportunity to say a few words at the end. First of all, I want to thank all the membership who attended today. This was a bit of a test and of what we could do with Zoom and provide some education to the membership. So this was our first virtual session. We did have a few glitches, which was great because it's nice to get those out of the way. And I think generally it was fairly successful. Love to hear your comments on the survey that was sent out. Unclite sent that out last week. And if you can think of anything that you would like to hear, any particular subject matter, we'll get the subject matter expert in. And I think we're going to do some more of these until we can at least do a physical a session conference. Speaking of the physical conference or a physical conference, there is another boot camp this year in the US. Luckily they could do some traveling, which we can't yet, but by October, they might you might be able to get travel requisitions and we might be able to travel in Canada a little bit more. If that's the case, you may be interested in boot camp because I don't think we can be ready by then because we're still in evaluation period as far as an online kind of conference. Go to the CTUG website and you'll see Connect, which we are affiliated with Connect, and there's information on the boot camp in October. So you could look at that website, and if you can get out of town, it's a fantastic session that they have over a couple of days. You can meet a lot of people, talk to product managers, and if you can pull it off, especially in this COVID time, I would highly suggest it and recommend it. Special thank you to HPE for providing the speakers, and to Justin, and to all the partners who are very active within CTUG and are very helpful, and they basically go above and beyond the call of duty for our organization in supporting us. In fact, they are providing some prizes in which we will be drawing for tomorrow. We don't really have enough time to do that right now. It's a little bit awkward to try and do prize drawings, but we'll have that out in an email tomorrow or in the next few days probably as to who won the prizes that the partners Conforti, Zypro, and CSP have provided. So having said that, are there any questions we can address at this time? You can put those in the chat if you like, or you can, if you like, demute yourself. That would be okay too. Looks like not. Again, thank you very much for attending, and watch your email because we will be having another virtual session, or a number of them, depending on how long the COVID lockdown lasts here in Canada. Again, thank you all for attending.
Thanks, Jack. Much appreciated.